Well, welcome to today's webinar from the Open Group. I do apologize for the slight delay in starting today, but technical difficulties which I'm pleased to say we've now overcome. So today's event is being brought to us by Enterprise Architects, which is a very active member of the Open Group, and today's speaker is Craig Martin. Before I go over to Craig to start his presentation, just let me go over a few housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. With regards to questions, which we intend to address at the end of the presentation, the best to submit a question that you'd like Craig to answer is via the text QA facility. Write a question into the text QA facility. Can I address it to all or all participants? That way everyone gets to see the questions that are being submitted. If you make a comment or you want to share an opinion with a fellow attendee, then probably the best mechanism of that is to use the text chat facility. And as I said, we will try and answer as many questions as we possibly can at the end. The event is also being fully recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early, or if you experience any local technical difficulties, everyone that's registered for today's event will get an email which will contain the link where you can access that recording. I know occasionally people do experience local audio problems, so that recording is ideal in that circumstance. So, Craig, if you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Simon. And apologies, everyone, for the late start. Plenty of errors in the way. But anyway, we're off to start now. So I just wanted to next hour or so with you, just taking you through specifically some of the disruptive factors occurring in the market and how we can respond to that from a business architecture perspective. So if any of you are interested in getting in touch with me, there are my details. And also to let you know that this presentation will be made available on SlideShare. The recording will also be made available online, so that if you need to go to anything, you can always track that back. And for you that have attended some of my other presentations, they are fairly content intensive. I feel like we're going a little fast, but that's the reason why you can use your patience later on as well. I'm happy to take any questions or comments later at this stage as well. All right, and I just put a little around a bit of a shake-up that's occurring, the results of the shake-up and the disruption, how to architect for it. And I like to set a lot of context, so we're going to spend some time looking at the market and some of the changes in the problem space, and we'll come in sort of with a landing within the architectural realm. I'm not into some of the detail I've dealt with in other webinars around all the intricacies of creating capabilities and how to assemble them, all the rest of that. I'm going to sort of end off of that space and refer you to those presentations where you can have a look at some of the detail as well. For those of you that don't know Enterprise Architects, just a quick little blip. We're a little company which specializes within the space, and presence in Australia, UK, the US, and some offices in Africa as well. So we specifically focus on the strategic architecture and enterprise design space, and that's consulting, training, as well as recruitment. So heading straight into it, there's a shake-up that's occurring, and you might have heard of this term before. It's referred to as disruption. Really what disruption is all about is an innovation that doesn't actually tackle an old market, it creates a new market. It effectively spins off a new, what we refer to as a value network. And the concept of disruption implies that this new market, along with the new value network, disrupts the old one and displaces it. And we're starting to see quite a bit of that occurring within the industry, and we need to respond to that accordingly. When we talk about disruption, it's not just about some of the differentiating factors like volume and price and cost, all of those aspects. Right? We're also dealing with a rip in the market. In other words, that we're upsetting the current market by creating new markets and an entirely new value system. And I'm going to touch on a little later as well this concept of a value system, and that's where the disruption tends to occur. So the within the value system space. Now, there are various different views on disruption. Face that disruption is a sort of a concurrence and has occurred throughout history, and is only spurred on by some type of technological advancement from the fact that the good old Jeep turned the tide of the Second World War by replacing the horses as a personnel carrier. The fact that an innovation in stirrups in the sort of medieval ages tide of sort of few knight battles and changed history around how knights were awarded and introduced an entire new economic system. Right, gunpowder. So all of those things are all what we would consider to be technological disruptions. Moving up to some of the more modern day disruptions, which we're going to spend more time with today. And these are which is the digital disruptions. So these are, the introduction of digital technologies that in effect have created new markets and disrupted some of the old ones. And these are all fairly well-known brands, ranging from the Apple brand, which interestingly makes most of its money from its devices, not from its iTunes or its App Store. Those are specific business model levers which they use to get lock-in on the device. Right to citizen space, which is innovated its business model, created a new market for cloud services. So the variety of disruptive factors that are occurring, and we're getting used to them nowadays. They're occurring quite often. But ultimately, business has to be able to respond to this in some form of manner, and that's the architecture discipline comes into its own. So, talk more around the disruptive space. Larry Downs has written an interesting book on the 9 laws of disruption. Really looking at the fundamental difference between the digital world and the non-digital world. A concept of what's referred to as rivalrous goods. And what it really means is that the digital realm, we classify it as non-rivalrous. In other words, multiple people can use these items in a consistent and ongoing fashion. That it doesn't get destroyed. And what's happening is the whole market of demand and supply is changing, because in the old days when there was a supply began to run out of certain commodities, well, that just meant the price went up. And now in the digital world, that doesn't necessarily take place because of this non-rivalrous factor. And there's some of the disruptive factors they deal with. And what he does, which I thought was interesting, which we've looked at in developing a digital strategy framework, are some of these principles around the new digital economy. And that refers to renewability. And basically that the information that is created is used over and over again. In fact, can be considered to be a renewable resource, or probably one more greener renewable resources out there, but that doesn't burn any fossil fuels or damage the environment in any apparent way. But the concept of renewability of our information and data. It then has the principle of what's referred to as magnetism, and there's a law referred to as Metcalfe's law, which basically says a network increases in value and more information is added to it, or as more people join it, which is effectively what's happening on the internet and a lot of the social network space. So the principles of the digital economy, that the more people use and consume it and take the information that's already available and build upon it, the more valuable that network becomes. Plus, one of the areas where it's most aligned to the traditional world, all right, or physical goods, is this vulnerability and the fact that, yes, information can be tampered with and there can be some corruption involved. The principle is on universality. This is this concept of everyone can access this information simultaneously. What's interesting is that they use the same information for a variety of different purposes, and that this is this concept of constructivism. In other words, we solve problems differently using the same bits of information that are available to us. And thirdly, the last one is the lack of friction. So the smooth make access to that information, the more valuable it becomes. Now you start to see, based upon some of these principles of the digital economy, carry yourself forward into the architectural space and have an understanding of what needs to happen and needs to change all the way down to the nuts and bolts. like to see how some of these principles would have quite a significant cascading effect downwards to some technological decisions and architectural and business decisions that need to be made in taking advantage of these principles. So what Downs introduces is this law of disruption. So he talks quite interestingly about three types of laws: the Metcalfe's law, Moore's law, and also this law of disruption, which is that basically this dissemination of change is uneven, and I'm going to touch on that in the graph later. And that what's happening is society is struggling to cope with this, and there's a significant backlash in the social, political, economic, and legal aspects of our society, and that the laws are not able to keep up with the disruption that's occurring. And so I recall back in the day when laws in place which prevented things like breakout, which means you couldn't use voice over IP because you're allowed to have your phone call break out on the other side once you've effectively traveled over the internet. Laws weren't keeping up with those new types of technologies and effectively making technology Skype and that illegal at the time in certain countries. So really, the principle, all the laws in the older society keeping up with disruption, it's not actually keeping up. It is what this law of disruption is referring to. So it's not changing at the pace. Those are some of the aspects that business has to deal with. They have to try and take advantage of digital, but they have to still do it within the constraints of a sort of socio-economic and legal structure. Meanwhile, there are competitors that are moving a whole lot more effectively or faster, get products to market, and sometimes aren't constrained by the same types of social and legal parameters. We dealt with Metcalfe's law. It's there for you, so you can download this later. Right, basically looking at the strength and power of a network growing. What is the result of this disruption been? Well, I spoke earlier about disruption altering entire value networks. And this is a specific one which is sort of close to my heart, which is the education space. And there's quite a bit of disruption occurring within the education space. And more specifically, you can almost see how the models change entirely, where you've got a sort of a model on the left which is quite classroom-centric, in which you teach at the school and you do homework at home. The actual fact that's happening is it's kind of turning on its head, in which you put the student in the middle, and you get a stage now in which you teach at home and you actually do homework at school. And that's just facilitated by the teachers within that environment. And and that's also Clayton Christensen is almost a sort of father of this concept of disruption. Book on that about calling the disruptive class. And that's sort of an example of what we're referring to, some of the modern day disruptions occurring in the industry. So what else is the effect that's occurring with this digital disruption? Well, for some of you that have ever done any causal modeling, what we have is you normally have an action and then there's a reaction. And in business, something might have occurred and we might react to it in a tactical fashion and not a strategic fashion. We might get the immediate feedback that occurs, and that might give us our immediate positive results. But in fact, what we often find in these sort of systems problems is that tactical solution in actual fact has a significant cascading effect, and there's a delayed feedback of that. Ultimately, when it eventually sort of finds its way back around, we realize that it made the original problem worse than there was to start with. And seeing is that when we talk about the digital disruption, is this feedback loop, in other words, the one that gives you this feedback into tell me whether did it work or did it not work, is actually reducing, which is advantageous and allowing us to make decisions faster. And this is, of course, well, we have the technology that can do it, but is the human mind able to deal with these bits of information in a more effective manner? And that's really the big data challenge, isn't it? There's all of this additional data, but our human minds, well, we've almost been conditioned to accept simplicity, to accept things that are beautiful to look at and simple to understand. And that's the challenge of our discipline, the architecture discipline, because we can deal with all this complexity, we can deal with all this noise which sits within an organization, but trying to shape it and make it easy to understand for people to make decisions, that's always one of the bigger challenges that we're faced with. So that's the impact of this feedback loop is being reduced. Because of this, we're seeing some pressure being put on the business model. Now, that's really how we define a business model. It's a market model, service model, and operating model space. But really what you're seeing is that there's pressure coming up from the bottom of this business model, and in that the bottom parts of that model are being commoditized. So with cloud, outsourcing models, and those types of business models within the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, application as a service, process as a service, sort of things, security as a service, and then there's integration as a service. All those techniques are being enabled, not techniques, but services are being enabled by the technology. So it's sort of gobbling at the bottom of that model, so to speak, out to the commoditization layer. But also happening at the top is that changing around individuals and their accountabilities. And I'm going to spend time elaborating on this. And business people themselves are needing to learn the ability of business architecture. A few debates on this topic. Is there actually a future for the discipline of business architecture? There's a future for the discipline of business architecture, but is there a future for the role of a business architect? Now, there's the question, because if the bottom stack is pushing itself up and the top pieces coming on, in other words, you've got chief digital officers, some of the chief marketing officers, who are starting to make architectural decisions and starting to understand this discipline of business architecture and how to link business effectively to the organization. It sort of squeezes the architect in the middle of these two worlds and starts to put him under a bit of pressure. And this speaks to this sort of realm as well. And if you've seen in the presentations, I do tend to land on the slide a bit because I think it has quite a strong influence on our discipline. And it's from Martin's book called Design of Business. And really it's about the whole left-right brain principle, but really an analytical thinking world, intuitive thinking world. And really on the right-hand side, you have these unresolved business problems. You have to travel this knowledge funnel down to eventually be, create robust, repeatable, and replicatable processes through the exercise of formality, through the exercise of architecture, through the exercise of automating it within technology and processes, all the formal methods, techniques, and frameworks which most of you on this call will probably be familiar with. But most of the drive and the change in the market is actually occurring on the right-hand side, because the left is actually becoming utility, it's becoming commodity, it's becoming everyday. Right? And we see it more clearly in this particular graph, which is one of my favorites, which looks at sort of strategic value or importance and then complexity and dynamics. And what's on the top right-hand side here is the mystery space. This is where unresolved business problems are sitting, and there's chaos, and there's innovation, and there's all that brain stuff which kind of sits within that domain. You've then got a process which has to occur of applying heuristics and taking that complex space and trying to find repeatable processes for it. In other words, well, can we actually take pieces of this and get it so we can reuse it and commoditize it? And ultimately that will lead to the bottom left quadrant, in which we'll seek to automate it, and that'll drop into all ERP systems and systems on the back end, which most of our competitors have got and use as well. Ultimately, top left quadrant, we would outsource some of that functionality. And that's really what the merge funnel is seeking to do. It's seeking to grab all of that sort of click space in the top right and drive it down through this funnel as quick as possible. And I think that's the business architect's role, is to try and stand and help that mystery space on the right, probably not as owner of it, but to at least have the understanding of how to take those concepts. How do we allow ideas to flourish, or help ideas to flourish through the organization by speeding up its process through this knowledge funnel? And what we're seeing is that, in actual fact, as more and more of our thinking becomes commoditized and find repeatable processes for it, and when we build applications for it and we automate it in technology, this bottom left section gets bigger and bigger, because more becomes available in an industrialized fashion, and services are now consumable, and I can get a service for pretty much anything that I need to do, and I can just do a mashup and string it together and solve a variety of different problems. Space on the left is getting more, is becoming available within that utility space. And then we see that in the services landscape as well, because significant services are being industrialized and outsourced into on the cheaper markets. But on the top right space, so what it's doing is putting pressure on this innovation space. And is it making it smaller, or is it moving it over to the right? Now, there's a challenge. I think it's certainly putting a lot of pressure on that system to come up with new ideas, new concepts, new ways of doing business, new ways to represent your findings that are innovative and not the humdrum of what we normally see within the utility space. And that's sort of disruption that's creating that effect and putting pressure on that space. And it just means that the rate of innovation and the rate of change needing to occur within that space is accelerating itself, let alone the rate at which we need to take that through the knowledge funnel. Now, this kind of settles me on this one here, which, it's been quite a bit of time working through the concept of this, but I just want to iterate the point is when we refer to disruption occurring, and specifically digital disruption, and we hear somebody talking about, we need a digital strategy. Well, in actual fact, the digital strategy is all about moving my customers from left to right. It's all about away from this product-driven, maximizing product profitability world, and going past even the customer-centric world, which is maximizing market share, and getting to this wonderful world of customer-driven. In other words, maximizing customer lifetime value. And really the sort of key dimension of that relates to the fact that it is individualized. We move away from this segment market into this highly individualized market. And how can I create a pool environment of predictive insight to create individualized, interactive, and proactive transmedia type experiences for my customers? That's the challenge of digital. This is the challenge for what we refer to as the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officers, for the Chief Digital Officers, is how to move an organization left to right. Now, there are some fundamental changes there, especially down within the technological, but also in the business lab. Try and use your marketing model to move away from a segmented model to an individualized model. Change your understanding of customers or your understanding of the data. Insight is an art to predictive insight. You can see there's some big hurdles that you need to jump over before you can move into this customer-driven space. So you can see the need to have a solid understanding of how you're going to architect for this new digital world. And almost you can see, well, if we look at a couple of value chains, well, some traditional value chains would have sat in the top section there, which is product-driven. Okay, let's go and build a Model T Ford, big production. All right, and we're going to plan it, we're going to produce it, we're going to sell it and promote it, and we're going to profit through your sales volume. To sort of customer-centric view, which is understand your market segment and your segment needs, build integrated marketing channels, and profit through increased market share. To this new concept of this customer-driven model, which is all about targeting the individual, understanding customer intention, doing outcome-based marketing, and then profiting through customer lifetime satisfaction. And these huge shifts, people, they're not easy to do, and yet the bottom one is actually where a lot of the CMOs are struggling. Their digital strategies have to cater for that shift, and they have a significant number of hurdles that they need to address as they try and move through that. Not only that, is some of the traditional management landscape is also changing. I found this article incredibly interesting from Ogilvy, specifically related to the 4 Ps of marketing and how they're changing. For those who have done your MBAs or know the space, it's all about product, price, and promotion. That's what's been built into all the management schools. But in fact, even that space is changing. It's an experience economy where everything is done at every place, at all different locations, and you're developing knowledge and media channels, trying new things, and we're not limited by devices or channels or geographic locations. And there's this concept of a value exchange occurring. And in a marketing perspective, I can't ask people to give me their details unless I'm giving them something in exchange for that. There's this value trade-off that's occurring in the digital space. And there's this evangelism which is occurring as opposed to promotion, which creates a sort of viral network that we have to work with. And you can see some of the fundamental principles in our marketing space are actually under pressure. This is an interesting definition we found from Bud Cadell around this concept of what exactly is digital. And see how it reinforces the message I've just introduced you to, which is this move to this customer-driven world. So it's a particular layer of all media that allows users to self-select their own experiences. Right? And the important point here is to bridge media and gain feedback. So you kind of see this consistent messaging. There's a feedback loop that I was talking about. This is allowing marketers to get feedback from their markets much quicker and better adapt and make changes much quicker. The problem is the IT environment cannot keep up with those changes that the marketing officer, for example, is picking up. and some of the challenges which are occurring in that particular space. So what we're seeing is that digitization is shifting the power to the consumer. Right? So this personalized product experiences that we seek and drive out. And the companies that get there first in this market, those are the companies that are going to win, are going to succeed. I think that in the market, that the countries that are still laboring at the back, producing products, build it and they will come, those tend to be the companies that are going to be suffer the consequences of not actually trying to shift into this digital strategy arena. Now, I'll introduce you to a concept here, and some of you might have heard it, but this is something which is in our framework, and it's referred to as a value-based intention. And ultimately, what a value-based intention is that all the noise of everything that I need to do over the internet, what am I actually trying to achieve? And often they're lifetime events, and you can see a few onto the right-hand side there. So what this means is, well, okay, I want to move suburb, and I want to move suburb in the most effective and efficient manner that I can. Well, there's councils I need to chat to, there's schools that I need to work, there's tax offices, there's the licensing department, there's employers, there's a variety of organizations that I need to register with. There's a variety of different business models and individuals that I'm going to be interacting with. But ultimately, my intention is to just move suburbs. So this is what's referred to as a value-based intention, and it's actually over and above the whole customer experience world. It actually sits above that layer, and these are the concepts of which we're talking about, customer-driven. And how can I assemble individual journeys and experiences for customers to begin to land at these value-based intentional sort of target areas that they're trying to address. See here, well, this effectively what we're trying to do is we're introducing either enhanced products and services or enhanced markets, so extended markets or new markets, and that's the sort of space that we're dealing with. That's a strategy game board on the left there, by the way. That's the space that we want to focus on. We want to understand some existing core business capabilities, and we want to understand how can we leverage those capabilities and those competencies to be able to enable this customer value-based intention journey that we want to take them on. Organizations, to be quite honest, are actually just struggling with that middle section. They're just trying to get to grips with what are the kind of capabilities and competencies that they have, in what state are they, and we'll need to change them just to do some of the basic fundamental stuff like reapportion the investment portfolio. So necessarily even got to some of the concepts and ideas that I'm referring to, and they still seem to be struggling with some of what we would term to be the traditional problems of the architectural, and especially the business architectural space. Now, probably a little push for time, so I won't go too much into this, but also we're starting to see the emergence of these types of things, a sort of transmedia world, transmedia storytelling. In that example, it's all about creating a TV episode, and the episode continues in a book, and it carries over onto a game. Play on your iPad during the day, and you probably interact with it in a billboard along the way. And if you want to take an extreme, something that we experimented with in the 1990s, usually you break into the material world, and to enhance people's experience, you have people following them around the street, and they're getting the impression they're being followed. Believe it or not, we've tried it, and some of you might recall the game and this immersive aspect of this transmedia storytelling. And that's this concept of taking individuals through a story and creating the right hooks, immersing them within your product and service offering, and get them to change their actions. Right? And you might be familiar with the term gamification, and really that's what that gamification is doing. It's trying to change actions, it's trying to change your behavior. So these are the techniques that are available to marketers to try and build these transmedia type stories, to create customer-driven enterprises, to be able to hook you into these stories in such a way that it's you're lost in this world of gameplay, so to speak, and get you to change your behavior and your buying behaviors along the way, and therefore improve his profit. But there's a challenge for this particular individual, and the balance between the CMO world, right, and the Chief Officer world, and COO and the CIO world. And in actual fact, even if you look at some of the fundamental building blocks of these two roles, they're quite different. I mean, even the CIO is quite focused on efficiencies and costs, whereas the CMO is focused on chasing revenue and chasing market share and return on investment. If he spends $1 more in this particular case, will he actually get a greater return? So therefore, he's not too worried about cost if he gets a greater return. So there's sort of two paradigms that these individuals are faced with. And at the moment, there's a bit of a tense relationship between these two roles. They need to find a sweet spot and a balance between their strengths and what they can provide versus what the CMO needs to achieve. Right? And that's back to this left-right brain aspect. The CMO is dealing with a lot of this intuitive side on the right-hand side, and that's this exploration and validity space. Not the analytical space, not the transactional and repeatable processes space. So he has to produce outcomes that meet an objective. Right? And basically, all they're caring about is showing money and earning the margin and the market share, and those aspects, especially that they need to address within their particular mandates. And really, the focus of the CMO has led to predictions like this coming out of Gartner. See here, the crash by 2017, the CMO will spend more on IT than the CIO. Now this reinforces the concept I spoke about of putting the squeeze on your business model. These roles that are actually coming down and now beginning to put pressure on the system. The CIO are in effect losing their mandate, so to speak, or their budget, and are needing ways to be able to rather support the CMO paradigm of exploration and not necessarily get stuck in their own paradigm of this cost efficiency. There's enough from the IDC. The line business executive will control 40% of IT spending by 2016. And this has an impact on even things like budgeting. Now you can see CIO across Asia Pacific, they control less than 60% of the entire IT spending budget. Okay, and this is fairly later. This is 2012. So that actually increased since that particular time. So all of this is in effect saying that more money is being spent on IT by people outside of IT than the people in IT. And that something changed within the IT department or under the CIO mandate in order to allow the CMOs to be able to deliver on this transmedia storytelling, to be able to deliver on this customer-driven vision and this digital strategy that they're hoping to realize. Now, just a couple of points. There's a shift that's occurring with the spending patterns within the CMO and the CIO. In traditional budget cycles required us all to go and put business cases and business plans together. And effectively, these big CapEx projects, capital expenditure projects, which kick off and, that CapEx is chewed into, eventually you release it and it becomes OpEx and we maintain it. Well, with the age of cloud, that's actually changing. The dynamics there are shifting a bit because, if a CM wants, or a line of business in the middle wants certain functionality, it just goes and pays a fee in some cloud environment, and that could even be processed as a service. So that the move from this getting a budget for the 1st of January for big capital expenditure projects, even that's going to be shifting, and that model is going to need to adjust as well. And we're actually seeing this in some of our own clients, where even the financial office, so the CEO, is faced with similar problems, in that the CEO and the line of business individuals are moving so fast, their finance department is unable to keep up because it's still following the same planning methodologies and the same ways of predicting financial insights, and themselves have been put under significant pressure to alter their business models. So it will also be put under pressure because, in effect, if you've got this highly good environment, this expert environment, which is sort of the space occurring, it's quite unpredictable. So if I'm doing a marketing event for, I don't know, let's say the release of a new movie or something to that extent, and let's say there's a scandal erupts, and which causes this app that I've created for this particular film I'm releasing to suddenly go viral. My cloud costs will go through the ceiling now because I've got this vertical scalability that I need to cater for because of something that went viral. So, well, how do I do budget for that? How do I force my expenses in something just on the infrastructure that needs to support that? So, some of those budgetary items are going to need to be addressed, and some of those models will need to change. the planning cycle. I've spoken about the planning cycle. The CMO, there's new opportunities which emerge. In order to make your business and keep your business relevant, you need to effectively adapt and be agile in a far efficient manner than what organizations are currently doing. It speaks to this limitation of the current budget cycle. Now, CMOs, these line of business executives, they have a dilemma. So they achieve all of this nice stuff, all right? But have a look at some of the obstacles that they have here, and you'll start to see the traditional space of the architectural issues that are occurring. Okay. In other words, customer data and customer interaction data unavailable, lack of appropriate tools and technologies. They can't integrate all of these channels. They can't understand the information that runs across these channels. There's some cost considerations. They can't get a complete view of the entire buying life cycle. They can't get a view of customer profitability and customer profitability per product profitability and all those things. So there's still some of the age-old problems around integration and information and linking it all together. Some inhibitors for this agenda. All right. And that's kind of at this point, which I will sort of head downhill now. Without this, okay, well, that's all nice, Craig. We set the context. This is a bit of the problem space. How do we actually architect for this? Ultimately, if we're individuals as the business architects that have to move people through this knowledge funnel in the most efficient manner, then we're the ones that have to take this chaos and some of this noise occurring and these innovative aspects occurring and put it through this knowledge funnel as quick as possible. And we've got to formalize it. And because ultimately, as much as I like it, it's going to land in a bunch of ones and zeros gates. And that means it has to be eventually extremely verbosely defined so that it can land up in an automation space and we can get the economies of scale that we need to do in order to leverage these types of technologies. How do we architect for this disruption? All right. This a graph that we put together, our CEO put this together in a bit of a market assessment that we've done last year sometime. So this means that we need to adapt to this change. So change is actually accelerating up this curve. So the products and the amount of products and services being released, the frequency of that occurring, and the cycle, the traditional product life cycle, is significantly reduced. You really need to spin through these quite fast. And if you just even think, even just a lower granularity level of certain apps that are released, how quickly we use those apps and move on to other apps, and innovation is required at that level. Products need to be innovated and adapted at a far more higher frequency, but that's not all. As we move further up the mandate, you'll see that digital is enabling us to innovate areas of our business more effectively as well. So business models need to change to cater for this disruption, and it needs to change, and it needs to change more often than it used to in the past. And an enterprise itself and how it does mergers and acquisitions and those types of things are needing to change in order to cater for some of these disruptions. So it's kind of accelerating a little up that curve. It's a bit extreme. It's not that bad, but what we're already seeing, and some of you that are involved in this space, you've heard of the concept of business innovation. This means that we're having to find innovative new business models to cater for the disruption, and that's what we're referring to there in the blue sections, innovation that occurs at a business model level. And really, that's also within our space. And some of you have seen me talk about this graph before. This is what we refer to as a mandate curve. And so, well, as an architect, as I move up this mandate curve, value increases. We're having some debate internally about this graph and its validity, and all of the types of debates, so we can just sharpen this better for you guys out there. What this means is that it's kind of sit at the bottom there, which is almost like EA equals enterprise IT architecture, and you kind of move up to the top right, which is the architecture discipline enables strategic architecture and strategic alignment. And sort of the top right there is all about cost to income ratio, shareholder value, mergers and acquisitions, and those types of things. And kind of down into improved business performance at the C level there, which is all about I'm losing 20 million in a quarter, find out why and fix it, improve my customer profitability. And your A and B space, which is the release ERP type environments or HR management systems and those aspects. So depending on the mandate given to the architecture function, my value will actually increase. And we see, well, architecture does actually occur right across that whole spectrum, especially for all of the business architects. And depending on what the business has mandated you to be involved with will dictate at what level you're going to be able to interact with your consumers here. And I think I'll take a slide here. And really what we want to just focus on as we finish off this end of this presentation is for the D&E space. And I won't spend too much time on this graph. You can look at it, but basically as you move up that curve, it accelerates for different industries. Really, so you're kind of having certain industries like retail, media, and entertainment that are sort of behind the curve and in effect needing to improve this mandate. In other words, give the mandate to the architecture function to help in these digital realms, to help in bringing this alignment, to enable things like the CMO agenda. So there's rates of change even within certain industries, and the business needs to acknowledge the architectural dimension and what it brings to creating that alignment, and therefore giving the mandate to help us in that problem space. Now we have in EA, this is what we refer to as our digital stakeholder map, and it refers to as the handshake shows you the handshake that has to occur between the CIO and the CMO, and really kind of see the different types of artifacts, so to speak, or activities that would need to occur around it. So CMO looking at the digital investment roadmap, the business strategy, creating customer experience strategies, excuse me, product services strategies, all the way around the cycle, and there's an overlap around digital information strategies, in which you see some of the dilemmas faced by the CMO around his need for access to this information in a timely fashion. And there's a big overlap with what the CIO needs to be able to deliver, to be able to address these particular stakeholders. And we put that in sort of our digital strategy approach. It takes a sort of a view that business architecture led is a sort of pillar that wraps all of the aspects of trying to realize the CMO and CIO agendas. And this is with business motivation and looking at the customer-driven aspects, all of that transmedia stuff that we spoke about. So all around, how do we create the customer individualized journey for this customer-driven to maximize customer life cycle? Looking at the different types of business models that can realizing that through digital strategies and roadmaps. And this is really effectively our approach to building digital strategy, to effectively realizing that vision of the CMO on his spectrum, on his movement from a product-led view to this customer-driven view. Within our business architecture realm, this a few times, this is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to accelerate these individuals through this funnel. And yes, it depends upon our mandate. And yes, if we're given a higher mandate to be involved up at that strategic level, then yes, we can accelerate it and help them accelerate and make those changes in a more effective manner. And in time, we have a variety of tools that we can use to realize that. From breaking the bridge between the mystery to the heuristic space, from the heuristic down into the algorithm space. This is all about how we industrialize processes within technology and how we can support the differentiation that occurs across our various business models. Do this through methods and approach that I introduced you to, and that really talks about understanding the motivational layers. And I'm not going to go into the detail of the business motivation model here. For those of you that want that detail, there's a couple of presentations on SlideShare and on our website that will give you the detail of what does the motivation model look like and what is it. This is a means to an end space, understanding business motivation, and then actually understanding, well, what does my business model actually look like? And can I create this disruptive, innovative business model to actually create this customer experience, customer-driven enterprise? And there you can see the layers that we deal with. A little bit of a typo there, forgive an error. And this talks about the value-based intention sitting at the top, which I introduced you to, acquiring remember the customer, moving suburban neighborhood, and then all of the underlying traceability and linkage that has to occur right the way through the cycle. Realize that into a roadmap for our customers. And really take a look at that sort of top space, because that's really when we talk about disruption, a lot of it tends to occur. These are disruptive technologies, and they have an impact on the mandate at the lower level. But I specifically want to deal with some tools that kind of sit up at this level. This quote from the CEO of Nokia, pretty telling considering Nokia's share price. with market decline over the years. Really, it's not the device, it's an entire ecosystem that they're being beaten with. And this concept of a value system, this actually occurs in a value system. For some of you that know your value chain world and the Porter space, you know this concept of this value system, and it's the entire ecosystem of which my business is running in my business. I'm example on the next slide. And what we do is understand this business innovation within this ecosystem and drive out strategic business models, our value discipline orientation, and operating business models, and ultimately a set of capabilities and resources. And this is the process that we take people through in really and define digital strategies. And it's this value system space that innovation occurs. So it's not just within your one organization. So for example, one of our clients would be the police department, and they sit within a much broader value system, which isn't just in the enforcement space. It's also in education, policy, judicial, penal, and the commercial space. And how can we create disruption within that space? I mean, take this model here and drop it into a country with a high crime rate. So my own country, which is South Africa, why are the prisons full? Well, to answer that question, don't provide more police. Look at the entire value system and see where we can innovate across that value system to address that specific problem. Now, this innovating in the value system, this is what I refer to at the top of that mandate curve. This is where we use tools like the business model canvas, right? And we iterate through a variety of different types of business models to be able to figure out, well, how can we stitch together all the building blocks of an organization to be able to create a disruptive type of model within the industry. Just wanted to refresh memories here on when we talk about a business model, Craig, what do you actually mean? And this is, I like Osterwalder's quote here, which is, creates, delivers, and captures value. And we use that sort of book on the left there to represent our business model, which is slightly the extended model of for you that have used the canvas. But the canvas itself, those types of tools, these are all of the tools that you do when you play with your ideas, in which you're innovating up at the top level. You're helping the CMO understand, well, how could he realize his vision at top level? An innovative business model, and this is why we call it a strategic business model. You can actually play with a couple of iterations of these types of business models. You're playing with your ideas, and you're putting these into these types of canvases that you can work with. And you're looking at market segments, you're looking at where you can make money, you look at how market segments can trade off with one another and support one another, you look at how you can produce freemium type business models, or disaggregator types of business models, long tail business models. Which of those mixes would work best as I try and position an organization within this customer-driven world? And these challenges that the CMO is faced with is not just having faced customer-driven paradigm, and some of the limitations of realizing that. He's got to understand all of the mechanics of, well, how do I actually make money out of this? What are the sort of key segments and relationships and value propositions that I need to deliver to my end customer? So this particular tool is very handy to speak to that level of audience, but it's still a certain amount of detail required to take it further for us. You can use this tool anywhere across the sort of product or service life cycle, from production to its growth to maturity and decline. We find it quite useful even in the startup phase, and doing startup at the moment, and in effect the canvas and those types of tools as you try and discover how to tackle and disrupt the market. They're good tools for you to be able to use even at that startup phase, but also in incumbent organizations. How can they reboot their organization? How can they shift away from a product-driven approach to a customer-driven approach, even just purely one step into the customer-centric, and they can play their ideas using the canvas to do that. And once you know that, at the end of the day, you'll walk away with maybe 5 or 10 different types of business models that you can measure. And Rita McGrath has put together an interesting model which looks at the different ways that you can measure the maturity of these business models. Now, each of us has dealt with maturity, right, of business models in the past, and different maturity tools and use to maturity. What this maturity assessment does is really just look at the top level business model and look for things like switching costs, entry, cost differentiation, your cost breaking structures, for example, like the way that Skype introduced their services. Look at scalability, like massively open online courses and how that's disrupting the education market. So it allows you to score those business models to see which of them come up with a more attractive business model. But you can't stop there, and often we find that a line of business goes away, and some of these exercises and producers, we've got this nice canvas, this all looks great, and we have to read canvas now. And then this speaks to, well, we've got to take that canvas down to the next level. How do we move it from this matrice on the left here and down into something which helps me decide which of those scenarios are the best ones for me to pursue? String together all of my capabilities in the right way. Which one of those can I get to quicker and at the least amount of cost? That's the level of detail that you want to travel down. And find that the problem to do that often sits within an ownership issue. And this was a graph that we produced for a tier 1 bank. Really had a fairly good ownership up at the top level in which their enterprise competencies or enterprise performance capabilities were fairly well understood and had ownership of them, and they had built in a couple of strategic consulting firms and identified the top 3 core competencies. At the bottom, there was a fairly good understanding of the IT services that were provided and the CIO's mandate that sat with that. But in the middle, there was this lack of ownership. There was a gap in who had stitching these pieces together, and just that horizontal ownership, but the lack of ownership across the cohesion mandate. In other words, who strings it together all the way from the bottom right the way to the top? Those you can't find them in an organization. Perhaps they're called something different. They might be called enterprise designers. Those people that wear the label of a business architect would tend to sit under the CIO, so we'd be sitting under the CIO's mandate, not sitting within the space here. So this speaks to pressure on the system around trying to find the correct mandate for your architects to help with this vision. And what we interact with customers is there's gaps along the cycle. We've done customer needs and customer interaction maps and those things, and link those down to capabilities which sit at the bottom. And the product team hasn't been involved, and the service team hasn't been involved because they're doing stuff on an agenda. So you lose synergy across the project or the enterprise, because you lose coherency the way I want to use it, because in actual fact all of these pieces aren't being aligned correctly, and that alignment is what the architect brings to the table. If with suitable enough mandate, that can really add a lot of value to the company, and that's the piece that we want to do. We want to create that alignment. That's where architecture provides strength across an organization. But I would hazard a guess that most of you on this call are probably, and if you're wearing the label of a business architect, you're probably sitting down here in the operating model space, and you're probably sitting under the CIO. And although we are seeing a change occur, and I would like to see more of this for the CMO, and this is a lot of the message we're pushing to the market, CMO to take that mandate, to realize the value that the business architect can bring to him, realizing that customer-driven strategy and that transmedia storytelling type vision that he wants to realize, and be to take ownership of the business architecture function, and then thereby pulling it up the mandate curve and giving it much sort of higher exposure and much more value within the organization. And we're starting to see a little end of that occur, but it's once again it's an education or understanding principle, and this is the pressure that's on the system, because we're actually seeing that CMOs themselves want to understand and know and learn the discipline of business architecture. They themselves will be doing business architecture, another discipline, not the role. Okay, I need to now. I've got 5 minutes to go. So what we tend to do is to say, let's do a quick win here. What we can help you with is we can focus on a value-based intention. Right? We can choose something like a customer wants to move suburb or something to that extent. Let's look at that sort of transmedia storytelling type of approach. Okay, but technologies free available that can do those types of things, and some fantastic technologies that can do it while you're in a cold shopping center. Or basically, hey, we noticed that you were using this on the internet, and it's a shopping list for your provider. This is on your shopping list. Oh, and we noticed that you're in the right aisle, and the item you're looking for is on the left-hand side. And by the way, there's 10 other people in the store that are wanting the same thing. If 10 of you buy it now, we'll give you a 50% discount. That technology is actually available now. Now, to realize those types of value, intention, outcomes, right, is the job of the architect to string that all together and to understand the journey that the customer must take across this cycle. So focusing on those types of experiences, that's when I actually start. That's going to give you a quick win. And what you do is you can build these cross-functional models, right? So string together all of the underlying capabilities in an organization to realize these types of experiences for the customer. Well, there's a cross-functional power that you can deploy that would allow to go to the CMO to say, well, these are in effect all of the capabilities required for you to realize it. And this is how they're strung together. And this is current maturity. And therefore, to realize that you need to only focus on these 3 or 4 areas and can link it directly to outcome. Now, I'm going to go into detail in the cross-functional space because we pushed for time. But a lot of this is within one or two presentations which shows you some of the models that we've actually used and how we string together cross-functional capabilities to be able to realize, especially customer interaction journeys. We represented in structures like this for those of the architects who like the architecture and the Archimate notation and want to chew into something a little more solid. You go down to this level of detail of understanding how we build cross-functionals across capabilities. And bearing in mind the CMO doesn't want to even anything like it, but your job as an architect is to understand and be able to deal with it, but then also be able to use things like the canvas and help on and realizing some of those ideas and helping those ideas flourish. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're going to play with Lego, you've got to have a bunch of Lego blocks. So, I've spoken about this in previous talks around, you need your Lego blocks and you need that consistent language across your enterprise, and you need to understand what your capabilities are in their current maturity, mix in those capabilities of people, process, and tools, and then how you can mix those blocks together in cross-functionals to realize customer experiences and value-based intentions, some of the ultimate vision that the CIO is looking to achieve. And what we do within our business architecture course, we take you through the journey as well. So we kind of teach you how to understand the motivation model, how to use the canvas, when and where to use it, how to help with the engineering stuff within a value system, lots of the value chain can I create from that, and then licensing that through capabilities and producing a whole bunch of overlays on top of that will help you answer things like investment portfolio, tactical versus strategic questions, and we overlay it in a template not dissimilar to the one that you see in front of you now. And really that's what we bring to the market as well, is a fairly comprehensive, applied, hands-on sort of workshop environment that teaches you some of these principles. And giving you the sort of path that we take through it. I'm sorry that's a little small. Hopefully you can zoom into that when you download the presentation. Look at the left-hand side. They're moving through that cycle till eventually we build capability models and cross-functional models and produce a variety of overlays on it and produce strategic insight. This is the process you go through when you produce a digital strategy. You're adapting entire business models to cater for all the shifts and disruptive factors that I spoke about in the beginning, to shift your organization from being product-driven to customer-centric. Well, what does that look like? Well, I can play it out for you, Mr. CMO. I'm going to go and build a hypothetical business model, and I'm going to show how the current organization will be able to realize that hypothetical business model. And this is how much it's going to cost you to make and realize, and this is how long it's going to take. Those are the questions that need to be answered for our CMOs seeking to realize that vision. So just on the course, you that are interested, here's my plug for the day. We are running some stateside courses. We run them in the UK market and around the globe, actually. So you're welcome to log on to our website and have a look. And there ends my story. My apologies for accelerating you so fast through that, and my apologies again for the late start. Hope too many of you dropped off. Thanks, Simon.
Craig, thank you very much. As usual, a really informative presentation. We had a very active debate on chat. I don't seem to have any specific questions on QA, and given the time, I think probably, Craig, this is a good opportunity to close today's presentation. Are there any further comments you'd just like to make, Craig, before we close down today?
Well, I just encourage all the business architects out there that afraid to go and speak to your CMO and learn that marketing language and that marketing messages and push. You can push yourself up into that space. You don't have to wait for the mandate to be given to you. So let me encourage you to chase those opportunities.
That's good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Please do keep an eye on the Open Group's webinar schedule page, and I really look forward to the next presentation you give with us. So at the time, I think I'll close the event and say thank you to everyone. Thank you everyone. Goodbye.